April the 9th, 2027. At 3:17 in the morning, the South China Sea. The night sky exploded. A sudden target lock on radar. And then two anti-ship missiles tore through the tropical night, hurtling directly towards the stealth destroyer USS Zumwalt, which was patrolling 58 nautical miles from the Spratly Islands. What unfolded was not chaos. It was precision. It was stunning. A calculated ambush. Within 3 minutes, the American destroyer vanished from surveillance satellites. The Chinese Type 055 destroyers, which had been silent for hours, suddenly activated their radar and jamming systems, a ghost fleet emerging from the shadows. It seemed the U.S. Navy had truly been cornered. But then, the sea struck back. An electromagnetic pulse fired from space, not from a warship, temporarily blinded the entire targeting system of the Chinese fleet. The Zumwalt hadn't sunk, it was hunting. What happened in that moment to cause the entire operation to collapse? And what was the message just sent across the Indo-Pacific? This was not just an offshore confrontation. This was a turning point. If you believe that real strategy matters more than headlines, subscribe, leave a comment, and join us as we dissect every layer of tactics hidden within this naval battle. April the 9th, 2027, the South China Sea. At 4:05 in the morning, just under an hour after the initial Chinese ambush, the U.S. Pacific Fleet's spectral counter-operation was officially activated. The USS Zumwalt, the most advanced stealth destroyer, was still operational, not in a defensive posture, but in a state of pursuit. The initial Chinese strike was thought to have neutralized the ship. But in reality, the AN/SPY-6 active defense system and the railgun, which are integrated with tactical AI, activated a silent combat mode, simulating a loss of signal to make the enemy believe they had taken down their target. Just as the Chinese Type 055 Renhai-class destroyers accelerated, preparing to launch a second wave of attacks, 3 SM-6 anti-ship missiles were launched from a Virginia-class attack submarine, hiding 112 nautical miles away. At 4:30 in the morning, the first missile struck the stern of the Renhai-class destroyer, destroying its long-range reconnaissance radar. The second missile was shot down by the HQ-10 air defense system on deck, but the third pierced the port-side defenses, causing serious damage to the engine control section. The entire Chinese fleet was forced to retreat northward, evading the long-range coverage of the Seahawk radar deployed from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which was moving rapidly on a south-southeasterly axis. At 5:00 in the morning, the U.S. Air Force at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam officially entered the fray. 2 B-2 Spirit Street strategic bombers, carrying non-lethal electromagnetic weapons, took off and approached the area 180 nautical miles from the Spratly Islands. Their mission was not to destroy but to neutralize the command signals of Chinese landing units and support ships. Having lost contact with Central Command for over 10 minutes, the Chinese fleet began to show signs of disorientation. In that moment, another strike was launched from an unexpected direction. The U.S. Navy Space Warfare Station on Diego Garcia had secretly launched a new remote sensing satellite, specifically designed to deceive the enemy's navigation satellite signals. From 6:00 in the morning to 6:30 in the morning, the entire Spratly Islands region descended into electronic chaos. With no satellite signals, an inability to determine location, and jammed radar, Chinese operational commanders were forced to order a temporary tactical retreat, hoping to hold their position for a later counterattack. This situation poses a question for the entire world. In the era of electronic warfare and space warfare, does victory still come from missiles or from the flow of data? Do you believe a silent victory can shift the global balance of power? Leave your comments. If you were the commander, how would you react in a situation where you lost all command signals in the middle of a battle? A new dawn over the South China Sea. April the 9th, 2027. From 6:30 in the morning to 8:15 in the morning. As the first light of dawn broke over the South China Sea, a seemingly calm body of water began to ignite. Not from heat, but from a series of synchronized counter-strikes from the air, from beneath the sea, and from space. At 6:45 in the morning, China redeployed a formation consisting of 2 Type O-52D destroyers and a Type 071 amphibious transport dock, supported by a KJ-500 early warning aircraft from Woody Island. Their objective: to regain control of the area where the U.S. had seized the initiative with its electronic jamming and multi-layered defense system. However, the U.S. had anticipated this reaction. At 7:05 in the morning, an EA-18 Graham Growler electronic warfare aircraft took off from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, flying along a radar-blind corridor created by the U.S. satellite, and began jamming all of the enemy's high-frequency communication systems. At the same time, sailors on the USS Zumwalt were ordered to switch to multifaceted combat, railguns to intercept, low-altitude reconnaissance drones to sweep for enemy submarines using sonar, and SM-2 medium-range missiles fired with split-second precision. At 7:20 in the morning, the first missile skimmed the surface of the sea, striking the main radar compartment of the Eastern Type 052D, destroying its entire tactical navigation system. The ship was forced to withdraw from the battlefield with localized fires. Immediately, the Type 071 destroyer fired back with anti-air guns, shielding the remaining destroyer and the KJ-500 above. But what no one expected was a U.S. Seawolf-class submarine, which was presumed to have retreated to Guam, suddenly surfaced directly beneath the path of the Type 071. At 7:37 in the morning, from a depth of 320 meters, the submarine launched two Mark 48 Mod 7 CBASS torpedoes. One of them breached the helicopter bay and detonated the fuel depot, turning the Type 071 into a moving fireball. It didn't stop there. At 8:00 in the morning, China ordered the emergency deployment of a DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile from a base in Fujian, with the goal of sinking the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. Less than 30 seconds after the missile left the launch pad, the U.S. early warning system at Yokosuka and the X-band radar system in the Philippines simultaneously issued an emergency alert. The USS Roosevelt immediately changed course, accelerating to 88% of its maximum power, while launching two SM-3 interceptor missiles. At 8:15 in the morning, the DF-21D was intercepted in the mid-atmosphere. A massive piece of debris fell just 15 nautical miles from the aircraft carrier's deck. A strategic attack worth more than $14 million was neutralized by just two interceptor missiles and a guided evasion tactic. No one expected it, no one predicted it, but the U.S. was prepared, and it was no accident. Modern warfare isn't just about missiles, it's about information, speed, and systems. In your opinion, which strike is more terrifying, a hypersonic missile or the silence of a submarine? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next part. The Battle for Air and Space. April the 9th, 2027, from 8:20 in the morning to 11:10 in the morning. As the military earthquake in the South China Sea subsided, the battlefield unexpectedly expanded to the sky and low Earth orbit. Countries in the region immediately went on high alert. But what happened next wasn't just about East Asia, it was about the global order. At 8:20 in the morning, China deployed two J-20 stealth fighters from Changzhou Air Base, carrying PL-15 air-to-air missiles. Their objective: to intercept the B-2 Spirit bombers that were on their way back to Guam. However, the U.S. wasn't alone in the sky. At 8:45 in the morning, from Andersen Air Force Base, two F-22 Raptor stealth fighters took off, with a mission to provide high-altitude escort and engage at extremely close range. Guided by the remote command system of an E-3 Sentry Command and airborne early warning aircraft, the F-22 second flew around Chinese radar from the northern Philippines, completely deceiving the air defense system. At 9:05 in the morning, one of the two J-22 was detected by cross-scan radar. An F-22 launched an AIM-120D missile, firing from a distance of 37 nautical miles. The missile pierced the J-20's left wing, forcing the pilot to eject over international waters. This loss created a serious gap in China's air control strategy. At 9:20 in the morning, the U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs confirmed that a Chinese low-orbit reconnaissance satellite, codenamed Haiyang 8, had been abruptly deactivated. Data showed a deliberate collision from an unidentified mini-satellite, launched 2 weeks prior from Cape Canaveral. This event marked the first time in modern history that a spy satellite had been intercepted by a non-lethal ground-controlled device, which used a directed microwave to temporarily disable it. At the same time, on the sea, the USS Zumwalt was being resupplied by a Spearhead-class fast support ship from Guam. Within 30 minutes, a new type of high-energy weapon was installed, an experimental Helios laser weapon system integrated onto the deck and ready to neutralize low-altitude attack drones. At 10:15 in the morning, a swarm of small drones launched by the remaining Chinese Type O-52D destroyer approached the Zumwalt using swarm tactics. But in less than 10 seconds after the Helios system was activated, the entire drone formation ignited in mid-air, with not a single one reaching the ship. At 11:10 in the morning, at the United Nations headquarters, diplomats began an emergency session on the escalation of military technology beyond space treaty limits. Meanwhile, international news headlines proliferated. The South China Sea was no longer a regional front. It was the flashpoint for an era of all-domain warfare. Sea, air, space, and cyber. The question was no longer who won, but how many domains had yet to be drawn into this battle. Do you believe future wars will no longer require soldiers, but only algorithms and satellites? Comment with your perspective. And if you want to understand more about how the U.S. is creating a strategic advantage through technology, follow the next parts. The Silent Shift. April the 9th, 2027. 11:30 in the morning. While military analysts around the world were preoccupied with developments at sea and in the air, the true strategic chessboard was quietly shifting. At 11:30 in the morning, a strange phenomenon was recorded by the U.S. NORAD, Early Warning System. A spatial diffraction zone spanning nearly 42 square kilometers appeared northwest of Hainan Island, China. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a natural electromagnetic wave. It was the signature of a device that had never been publicly revealed. Within the next 15 minutes, signals from 3 commercial reconnaissance satellites were also jammed simultaneously. China issued no statement, offered no comment, provided no confirmation. However, in a leaked report from a civilian research facility in Tokyo, geomagnetic analysts identified a jamming pattern similar to the signature of a non-contact electromagnetic pulse weapon, a type that had previously only existed in simulations. At the same time, in the operational area of the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group, the SPY-1D high-altitude radar was interrupted for more than 30 seconds. On the sea, there were no missiles, no aircraft, but the navigation equipment on all 3 escort ships reset simultaneously. Shortly after, the U.S. Strategic Command ordered the activation of a top-secret emergency response unit, codenamed Sentinel-Arc. This was an electronic seismic defense system, secretly installed in 2024, designed to detect and counter directed energy devices or space jammers. At 12:00 in the afternoon, a reflected energy beam was activated from space, targeting the coordinates of the unusual signal emission, an area near China's Yulin naval base. Within 20 seconds, the interference zone disappeared. U.S. radar and navigation equipment was fully restored. Neither side confirmed that an engagement had occurred. But the world understood. A weapon that had never been made public had been used and countered. And this was the turning point. Not all weapons are visible. Not all battlefields have explosions. But their existence is enough to redefine deterrence theory in the 21st century. Do you think silence is the most powerful weapon in modern warfare? Comment with your thoughts and prepare for the next part. A comprehensive strategic analysis and the global consequences of this encounter. Strategic Summary. April the 9th, 2027. Operational Debrief. After nearly 9 hours of intense confrontation on 3 fronts, sea, air, and space, the balance of power temporarily tilted in favor of the United States. Not because of the number of missiles launched or ships sunk, but for something deeper. control of information, and strategic resilience. China opened with a precise, calculated preemptive strike, but they failed to anticipate that their attack would become a test for the US's entire network defense system. The key to this operation was the ability for tactical adaptation. The U.S. fleet did not attempt a direct confrontation. Instead, it drew its opponent into a layered defensive network, where every attack was met with a faster-than-expected response. From the Zumwalt to the F-22 second, from ground-based radar to reconnaissance satellites, every unit coordinated with near-absolute precision, reflecting a strategic level of real-time command. The appearance of directed energy weapons and the Sentinel Arc unit revealed that the U.S. was not just defending itself, but was ready to enter a phase of deterrence using advanced electronic technology. As for China, despite causing initial damage, they ran up against the limits of tactical stealth technology and lost electronic control during a key phase, which made their counterattack fragmented and ineffective. Strategic reflection. In an era where information is a weapon and a signal is life, the nation that controls the digital sky controls the game. A day after the clash. April the 10th, 2027, one day after the encounter. One day after the unprecedented confrontation in the South China Sea, the sea was calm. But what remained was not peace. It was a silent question echoing through strategic meeting rooms from Washington to Brussels, from Beijing to Moscow. Will the wars of the 21st century break out without a single shot being fired? In less than 9 hours, the world had witnessed a destroyer thought to be sunk, which turned out to be a strategic lure, an electromagnetic pulse strike from space, which was countered by unannounced technology, an air defense operation combining surface ships, fighter jets, and satellites, commanded from over 14,000 kilometers away. This entire operation was not broadcast on television. There were no images circulating to the public, not a single official statement from the governments of either country. But military circles understood clearly, this was not a random confrontation. It was a test of readiness, a test of deterrence capabilities, and above all, a test for a new global order, where technology is no longer an advantage, but a condition for survival. The U.S., once again, did not just prove its military might, but reaffirmed its role in maintaining global stability, not with bombs and bullets, but with proactivity, control, and the ability to prevent conflict escalation. When superpowers have enough weapons to annihilate each other in minutes, strength lies not in the ability to attack, but in the ability to hold one's hand from pulling the trigger. Strength is not for destruction. It is for preventing chaos. And if there is one thing this unofficial naval battle in the South China Sea left behind, it is this. Modern warfare may be without smoke and fire, but there will always be a loser if we are complacent. You have just followed a comprehensive analysis of one of the most terrifying simulated military scenarios in the high-tech era. If you believe that knowledge, warnings, and strategy are more necessary than ever in this uncertain age, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with those who need to understand what is truly happening beneath the surface of peace. Because history is not only written by actions but also by warnings that were ignored.